Welcome to the Hanley Effect, a podcast by the Hanley Foundation designed to educate, change minds, and save lives. Our goal is to inspire you, showcase our innovations, and change the conversation about addiction and mental health. Join us as we unravel stories of resilience, recovery, and hope.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Hanley Effect. I'm John Dibin.
I'm Rachel Dosical.
How you doing, Dr. D?
Good, Dr. D. How are you?
I am doing well. You know, it's funny. We get to sit in front of a camera every once in a while and just talk about stuff. But there are people who do this for a living at...
I can't even imagine.
I mean, way higher levels than we can imagine. I mean, you're great at it, but I just kind of, struggle through. But today we've got, our guest is Laurie Dhue. And Laurie Dhue is an immensely accomplished, if people are watching, they're going to recognize her. She's an accomplished journalist and broadcaster. She's been an anchor. But she's here also to talk about, she is fearless in advocating and to help people with addiction know that they are not alone, to educate folks. I'm so excited to hear her story and to have her here. So we just want to say, Laurie Dhue, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, John and Rachel, thank you so much for having me. And I'm not on TV anymore. I left the TV news world behind about 10 years ago. But yes, I was on camera a lot. And it's interesting. I think we all find ourselves performing on camera, even if we weren't news anchors, right? Like we're all in the day. And I'm thrilled to join you all because I'm always delighted to get an opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope, and to talk about the challenges we as the recovery community face, the blessings that we face, and how we can continue to move our movement forward and help as many people as we can. So thanks for having me.
You have just, in my thinking, you've just given us the format of what we would love to hear from you. And so we'd love to just let you tell us about what you do, what you're doing now, why you're doing it, and your story that brought you here today.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of Hanley, and I'm a big fan of any organization that helps people. I think that's why we all do what we do, because we have to help ourselves and then help others. That's what life is all about. That is what the world is all about, especially when it comes to mental health and substance use, right? We can't do it alone. We shouldn't do it alone. And so the more people we can bring together as a community, the better. So, we humans are built for connection, right?
Right.
When we come together on a podcast, or we go to a 12-step meeting, or we go to any sort of gathering where people feel safe talking about their mental health issues, their substance use issues, it creates an environment that is free from shame, free from stigma, that brings us all closer together. When I got sober almost 19 years ago, and I just celebrated my 19th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Amazing.
Thank you. I will take it. If somebody had said 19 and a half years ago, you're going to get sober, I would have said, well, you must be high on something, because there's no way ever going to happen. We do recover, and it's been an amazing journey. But the reason why I brought up those concepts of connection and community is because that's what puts it all together, right? The connecting, the idea, and the putting into practice. We can do together what we cannot do apart. So just to kind of go through my story very quickly, I think that I was always going to be an alcoholic. I think genetically I was predisposed. My father was an alcoholic who also abused drugs. He died about 1.5 years ago indirectly of alcoholism. And I also have it on my mother's side of the family. So I think I had the genetic predisposition. And then I was the victim of a childhood trauma when I was 6 years old that we know now, with all the family work that we do and all the psychiatrists and experts in the field letting us know, and there is data showing that when a child goes through a trauma, it directly leads to things like unexplained anger, and rage, inability to form lasting relationships, addiction. So for me, the genetic predisposition, the childhood trauma, sort of set me up for um, having a proclivity towards wanting to solve my problems through drinking and drug use rather than trying to solve them internally, right? So I also think that, I surrounded myself with people who drank the way I did. And being in the TV news business, it was unbelievably stressful, especially for women. I think that in TV news face a lot more pressure than men do. And I think it's improved a lot since I left news about 10 years ago. But I think for a lot of women, we were expected to be perfect, right? We needed to look perfect. We needed to deliver perfect. And I always prided myself on looking perfect, but on the inside, I was really dying. And I think that pressure that I put on myself to be a super achiever at a young age came back to bite me in the butt, quite frankly. And again, I turned to alcohol and drugs as a coping mechanism rather than seeking help in other ways. But I think I never actually tried to get sober over the years. I just thought it was my lot in life. Like, okay, I'm a TV news anchor. I'm going to work hard, play hard. I am a high functioning alcoholic who also happens to be in love with cocaine. And I'm just going to keep this lifestyle going. And then one day I'm going to die. That sort of my mindset. And then when I realized, oh, I am going to die from this after I overdosed one night, almost died, survived by a team of doctors who brought me back to life. Um, And unbelievably, after that overdose, I did not get sober for 2.5 more years. So that's really, that just shows you how insidious this disease is.
Right.
I died, and 4 days later, I took a drink of alcohol and didn't get sober for a long time. But once I realized this is going to kill me, and I made that life-saving decision on March 14th of 2007, it put me in a whole new mind frame, a whole new mindset. And so for the last 16, 17 years, I've been helping other people. And that's what I do now. So I work as a consultant for families. I'm a public speaker. I do as many podcasts as I can. And I try to let people know that they're not alone and that shame and stigma have no place in the equation, and that this is a family disease that affects every single American family, and that we can't solve this alone and we don't have to. So that's kind of a quick summary of where I am. And I can say that being sober is the greatest gift I ever gave myself, my friends, my family, my colleagues, my society. I love being sober. I don't miss it. I don't miss drinking. I don't miss using drugs. Not every day is perfect. I've feel like sometimes I've had more hardships in recovery than I ever did when I was using. But maybe that's just because I feel my feelings now and I don't cover them. So I know I've been talking for a long time, and I would love for you all to break
No,
in
no.
whenever.
Laurie, just a question for you. You talk about being sober for 19 years, but you left broadcasting 10 years ago. How were those 9 years when you were sober and you were still on TV?
Great
Because
question.
it sounds like there were a lot of
Right.
pressures when you were in that role.
Well, it was interesting. I was very scared when I first got sober, and I didn't tell anyone, any of my colleagues at the network where I was when I got sober. I didn't tell one person, even though a lot of people behind the scenes knew that I drank too much, but no one ever approached me. No one in management, none of my colleagues. And I wish they had, but again, not their responsibility. It's mine. So I was sort of tiptoeing through early recovery and keeping this big secret while I was on national TV every day. And, it's not like I wanted to drink. I didn't. honestly, from the first day I put down the drink, I really haven't had any cravings. And I think that that's because I was truly ready to get sober. I was bankrupt in every possible way. I was absolutely exhausted. So it's not that I wanted to drink and drug after I got sober, but it was kind of like, okay, how do I navigate life now sober? How do I navigate the TV news world? How do I navigate working with my colleagues? And it was tough because I was sort of gingerly, I wasn't that confident when I first got sober. So I was kind of gingerly going through life. About a year into recovery, I left TV news for a few years and decided to focus on other ventures. Then I got back into TV after that and found that the company that hired me after that, the head of the company was sober. So it was really
Wow.
this full circle moment and worked for someone who was also in recovery. So I had a lot of support and sort of in the middle of those two times on TV, I went public with my recovery. And I went on the Today Show, I went on CNN, I went on all the networks where I used to be on as an anchor and talked about my disease. I talked about my journey. I talked about how I got help and how important it was for me to help others. So it actually wasn't that tough to navigate.
I love that. That's really terrific. Really, really terrific.
When we look at the disease of addiction, we look at the epidemiology of it, and we look at all the things that kill people. One of the things that we talk about is stigma, and the power of stigma to keep people sick, to keep people from getting help. What was it that pushed you? 'Cause it sounds like you were living under that threat of that stigma, but something pushed you to go from being quiet to being
Yeah.
on CNN. What happened?
What happened? What do you mean what happened?
What moved you from being, saying, "I'm not telling anybody about this," to saying, "I'm not only telling everybody, I'm telling them on CNN?"
I'm going to go
And
right there. Okay, I got it now. So what happened was that someone broke my anonymity publicly.
Mm,
And obviously that was not anything I had hoped for. It was not anything that I expected to happen. But I had given some remarks at a private dinner in Washington, D.C. And I was one of three speakers, and I was asked to talk about the role of faith in my life. So as I understood it, this small dinner with less than 100 people, it was supposed to be an off the record dinner. And what I now realize, and gosh, what an idiot I was to think I'm in Washington, D.C. What I say is definitely going to be on the record, even though I was assured that it's off the record and that nothing would be repeated. I should have known better. So there was a gossip columnist, a TV news gossip columnist who was in the audience that night who heard me speak. And I talked for the first time publicly, but in a very small room, about the role of faith in my recovery from alcoholism. And you could have heard a pin drop in this room. And there were very well-known people, including senators and other politicians and well-known people in DC who were in the audience who were all completely silent while I was speaking. Then I got a standing ovation. I had people coming up to me after the dinner saying, my brother is an alcoholic, or my
yeah,
father struggled with it,
right.
or I can't believe you were so brave. Never did it occur to me that there was a journalist making notes. She wrote a story overnight about me. And the next morning when I woke up, it was all over the internet. So at the moment, in that moment when I woke up and all my friends are texting me saying, "Oh my gosh, you're all over the internet," I thought my life was over. I
Mm,
really did. I was crying. I thought, wow, I should not have been so trustworthy when someone told me this is off the record. But then I started getting emails and Facebook requests from the Today Show, from Good Morning America, from Inside Hollywood, and all these other news networks saying, "We want to talk to you. would you be willing to come on the Today Show and tell your story? And I made a few calls. I called my family. Now, my family knew I was sober, but I'd never gone public before. And I asked my family, is this okay? Because your lives are about to change, because I'm going to go public and everyone's going to know, and the church community is going to know. And, you know, everyone's going to be asking you about this if I go public. And my parents, my sister, they all said, you should go for it. And then I called my agent and I said, what do you think? And he said, I think you should do it. And so that day changed everything when I went on the Today Show.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. You talk about being able to make this difference to so many people nationally, and it must be tens of thousands of people who have found hope with your story. At the same time, you talked about your dad just passed within the last couple of years from addiction. Did he recognize that he had an issue?
You know, this is such a sensitive point for me, and I haven't spoken that much about my father, but I'm happy to right now because it's been a year and a half, and I have had to process it. And, you know, his health problems that he suffered from, Parkinson's, dementia, and such, were directly caused by not only his chronic alcoholism, but falling and hitting his head and getting concussions.
Yeah.
So what I saw, and of course, you know, I drank the way my father did. My father and I were very close, and I was so much like him. And I'll tell you, first of all, when I got sober, he lost his drinking buddy, right? He
Mhm.
lost a relationship with me. I'm not going to say, I mean, look, my father and I were so very close, and then I got sober, and I know he was proud of me, but I know that he was ashamed that he couldn't do it also. And he never tried. You know, for many years, I would try to talk to him. And as we know, you can't make somebody get sober as much as you might want to. So for anybody listening to this who has a family member or a best friend or a colleague who, you know, you feel like shaking them and saying, just give this a try. Why can't you just get sober? It really has to come from within. No one could have gotten me sober before I was ready. And unfortunately, even though I tried to be a power of example to him and I had many tearful conversations with him, I yelled at him many times, which of course is not the way to go about it. But I loved him so much. I could see that his health was failing as a result of his chronic alcoholism and drug abuse. I just wanted to say, Dad, let me help you. And he just didn't want it. And, you know, eventually his health problems, I believe, were really exacerbated by 50 years of drinking. Um, and he died as a result. And unfortunately, we were estranged at the time of his death. And so for me, that has been something that I have struggled with. He knew why we were estranged. I couldn't have him in my life. But I will say that for anyone who's starting to feel sad now, I feel your pain when you have a family member struggling. I did go to the hospital the day before he died, and he was unconscious, but I spoke to him for 45 minutes and I forgave him.
Mm.
And that really important closure for me. And, you know, I believe in prayer. I talk to him every day now. And I talk to other members of my family, like my 4 beloved grandparents. I talk to them every day. And for me, talking to my father now, it might sound woo-woo to some people, but I'm able to speak with him in a way that lets him know that I love him. So that
Wow.
is a really long, long answer to your question, but it was tough watching him. And, you know, I've had other family members who have struggled with pill addiction and drinking, and it breaks my heart. But as you know, you can't force somebody to get sober. You can be a power of example.
Thank you for sharing that. Your words, I think, are gonna bring a lot of comfort to our listeners. You know, we say that the patient is the family and the family is the patient.
Mm,
You know, we
mm,
know we know how difficult that is.
Absolutely. There's there's so much power in that. Yeah, I'm given pause right now. I really am grateful for that moment and you sharing that with us. And because there is a power in people knowing that they're not alone,
Yes.
and that's your message, but people hearing that even in the grief of losing loved ones to this, you're not alone. None of us are.
No,
And
mm-mm. No, we're not. And, I went to an AA meeting the day after my father died, and the room literally embraced me. They knew that he had not been well. And of course, my friends in my 12-step program had heard me share about my father over the years and how frustrated I was. And when he died and I went to my first meeting afterwards, people literally embraced me. And I got a lot of handwritten notes and cards saying, you did the best you could with him, and he is in a healthier place now. And I do believe that there is something after this world. I do have a very deep faith in my higher power, who happens to be God. I know that a higher power can look like a lot of different things for people. For me, it's God. And I know that he's in a better place. He's not sick anymore. And maybe that is comforting for some people who might be watching or listening right now. Um, and there is community out there. So you do not have to go through this alone. Help is out there. Hope is out there, even when you do lose a beloved member of your family or a good friend to this disease. And, this disease of addiction and everything that includes: alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder, gambling, shopping, eating disorders, and all of that. Every single American family is affected by it.
right.
So um, that's why I keep doing what I'm doing. And I know, John and Rachel, this is why you do what you do and why Hanley does what it does, because this affects everybody.
Right.
We lose hundreds of people every day to this disease. And,
That's right.
I often say it's like a couple of 747s dropping out of the sky and crashing every day. That's how many
Right.
people lose every day.
Right.
And that's
Every
breaking.
day.
Every day, hundreds of people die from this disease. And talk about breaking news. If I were an anchor and I had to cover 2 plane crashes every day, it would be like, okay, we got to solve this problem.
Right.
Why are the people dying in plane crashes? Okay, let's solve it. But it's interesting because of shame and stigma and people thinking that it's a moral failing or that it's flaw in character. We have not gotten the attention historically that we should have. I do believe that's changing. And it's podcasts like the Hanley Effect. It's you all doing what you're doing and me doing what I'm doing, and 30 million people in recovery, and you know thousands of work in mental health and substance use. We're all making a difference.
Yeah, I mean I'm still reflecting on your story about the small dinner.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me that still today that's news. That would happen again today, not
It might.
19 or 18 years ago. That that would be all over the internet, and it's mind-boggling. It's like, how is that breaking news? But it really is. And that's in part, at least, where the shame and stigma comes from. And it's a shame.
Yeah, shame and blame and stigma, they have no place in the conversation. The three of us know that. Millions of other people know that. But it's a matter of changing hearts and minds and really educating people that, yeah, that this is a flaw in chemistry, not a flaw in character. This is not a moral failing. I have a disease that tells me I don't have a disease, and for people who struggle with the concept of understanding that this is a disease, I would tell them, use Chat GPT, look into it. Literally, educate yourself about, no, and I don't mean that to be smart ass or anything. It's more
It's
just like,
great.
hey, listen, The American Medical Association characterized this as a disease back in the early 1950s. So this is nothing new. And it's not an excuse. Like, I don't say, well, I have I have the disease of alcoholism and substance use disorder, and therefore I'm excusing every bad thing I ever did. That's not it at all. It's an explanation for people.
Well, and the ultimate point is that, you know, compassion and mercy and help is what is required when any of us have a disease. And, addiction is that disease that tells you you don't have a disease. And unfortunately, we still deal with stigma that says it's a moral failing, and that somehow gives people permission to be cruel. And I think the key is that we love people with chronic illness, and we treat them no matter who they are.
With
Love,
dignity
Right.
and
love.
respect.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, love people where they are. I realize that sometimes we are very hard to love. And then there is that important, you must put up boundaries with the person you love. You can detach with love. We don't want your shame. We don't want your anger. It doesn't help us. Do we shame diabetics when we see that they are obese and they eat cake every day and that they are costing our taxpayer system just as much as addiction is? We don't shame obese people for having diabetes. It's the same thing. Why do we shame people who have a disease like this when really we need to help them and love them and support them? Because those of us who get sober, we go on to help other people, right? We go on to do great things in the world. I should be dead, but I'm not. I got sober and now I help people. And what I'm doing now is creating health and wellness. I'm creating health and wellness services for family offices and wealth managers. So I want to pass on the gift of good health. Good health is wealth. Sobriety is wealth. Mental health is wealth. And that's what I'm doing now. And I love it so much because I think, who doesn't love helping people?
Well, I am going to help by being the bad guy, because we
Always.
are
Yeah.
at that time. I always have to be the bad guy. I first of all, Laura, thank you so much for all of the show. I mean, in a brief time, we've gone, kind of a lot of different places. But thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for being out there and doing the work that you do. We love to give our guests the last word, and our audience. You know how people, they figure out who the audience is, and we've got a wide variety. And so, thinking about that wide variety, what is
Yeah.
one thing that you would like our audience to hear from you as the last word today?
Well, John and Rachel, thank you again for having me on. I'm always grateful for this opportunity. And what I would tell people who are watching or listening is that you are not alone. Help is available. And if you have not prioritized your own health, whether that's physical health, mental health, emotional health, please do so. It can make an enormous difference in your life. Maybe you're scared, maybe you think you can't do it, but if I can get sober and improve my health, then anybody can. And I would just say, hey, I'm also available. Reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I'll help you in any way I can too. But you are not alone.
I love that.
That's
That's the
so
best
great.
possible message. Lord, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Dr. D, thank you. Had a blast
Thank
as
you.
always.
Thank you, Laurie. It was just amazing to have you here.
Oh, thank you both so much. And thank you to the Hanley community for having me on.
And thanks to everybody who's watching or listening. We'll see you next time on The Hanley Effect.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for the Hanley Effect. To learn more about our programs, visit hanleyfoundation.org or call 844-502-4673.